Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to APHUG Lesson 7.8. In Lesson 7.8, we're going to discuss 3 words. The 3 words are number 1, agglomeration, number 2, deglomeration, and number 3, special economic zones. So the first 2 words fit into our study of industry because agglomeration and deglomeration have to do with industry location placement, which we talked about in the first few lessons. And special economic zones has to do with free market reforms. So we talked about how some countries have command economies where the government controls you. And so the government limits production and the government might even own all the companies. But as countries decide that they want to move up the development ladder, they've decided that being more capitalistic is actually better than having a command economy. So that's how those 3 words fit into our study: agglomeration, deglomeration, and special economic zones. At the most basic level, agglomeration means a concentration of human activities in a cluster around a central place. So on the test one time, one of the answers was urban agglomeration. And no one really knew what that meant, and everyone was kind of thrown off by that choice, and some of you picked it because you didn't know what it was. And so you thought maybe it was the right answer. So now we're going to explain what urban agglomeration means and just what agglomeration means in general. So agglomeration is a cluster. So when I said urban agglomeration on the test, I meant a city and then all its surrounding suburbs. So that would be an urban agglomeration because there's a cluster of different types of cities all next to each other. In our case here of factories, you can also have agglomeration. So agglomeration can happen when one factory moves in from a certain industry. They decide that that's the best place to locate their industry based on all the other things that we've talked about, right? That have to do with costs and transportation and raw materials and people and all these things. So they decide the best place to build their factory or locate their service. And then after that, other companies that do the same thing, so maybe they make the same thing or maybe they provide the same service, they decide to also locate in that same location. And then you get this snowball or like build-up effect where a lot of companies do the same thing are all located in the same place. Because of that, then other secondary companies that maybe supply them or maybe the people that educate the people that work in those places, those businesses start to move to that place too. So agglomeration is this clustering or snowball effect of all of these companies that do the same kinds of things coming together. So the companies locate near each other to take advantage of a shared labor force or specialized suppliers that they need to help out their business, or service providers, right? So specialized suppliers would be if they are a factory and they require certain goods, like a car company will need the tire factory close by, or maybe it's the tech industry and they need a lot of people close by to answer the phones or something like that, right? So service providers. So all of those secondary industries will also locate near the main one. Time for examples, because examples make everything better. So the first one is a historical example, back to cars, which we've talked a lot about in this particular unit. So cars. Henry Ford decided to locate his factory in Detroit, Michigan, because he felt it had all the right characteristics. Well, then other car companies also decided to locate near Detroit, Michigan, so much that Detroit has been nicknamed Motor City. Okay, then I wanted to give you another example from real life. So as you guys know, right now I'm hanging out in Pennsylvania with my parents, and in their home county, the number 1 employer, so the number 1 business that employs people in Blair County is a hospital system called UPMC. So UPMC is the number 1 company that gives people jobs in Blair County. It employs 3,000 people. And so there's, of course, one main hospital. And then to show that it's an example of agglomeration, we also have, so the one main hospital and then 3 other outpatient or surgery clinics that also go with it that are all in like a 10-mile radius of the main hospital. And then also I wanted to show you how secondary industries are also involved. So I'm going to put up on the screen a map. So I just did a quick Google search of all the pharmacies located in Altoona, and you can also see that because of the amount of hospitals and the different things associated with healthcare, there's also quite a number of pharmacies located in the region as well. So the hospital is like the one thing, and then you have those secondary hospital services like the outpatients and the surgery also agglomerating near here, and then like on a third layer you also have all of the pharmacies. So all of that is an agglomeration of healthcare services in Blair County, Pennsylvania. Okay, word number 2 is deglomeration. And so just like a decline, a deglomeration is the opposite of agglomeration, and things are going away in deglomeration. So what can happen according to the theory is that sometimes a place can just get overcrowded or packed with that one particular industry. So much that maybe, especially the workforce, maybe they're overutilized, like they're working too hard and there just isn't anybody else who's trained to work in the industry, or maybe the suppliers are working overtime and they're just not able to perform on the same level for a new industry. So what can happen is that one of the companies might move away from the area and relocate to a new place, or maybe if there's a company who is looking to locate in that exact spot and have their company there too, they might be turned off by it because they realize that that particular place has saturation in terms of that industry. So real life examples that Honda wanted to move to the United States and have some factories here, and of course they looked at Detroit as a great example of a place to have their factories, but then they realized that really Detroit was saturated already and that it wouldn't be beneficial to locate their factory in Detroit. So instead, they chose to put their factory in Ohio. It was still close enough to take advantage of some of the agglomeration effects, but it was far enough away so that they weren't completely overutilizing all of the resources of Detroit. Okay, so our third word of the day is special economic zones. So we've been talking a lot about developing or developed countries and ways that countries can become developed. We saw already in a previous lesson about the Asian tiger countries who took advantage of footloose industries and government loans in order to create fast-growing economies over in Asia. We also discussed in one of the very first lessons that some countries are kind of held behind because their government wants complete control over the economy, right? We would say that that's a communist economy. And so over time, some of these, particularly we're going to look at China and Vietnam. So China and Vietnam had really strict command economies where they wouldn't let foreign companies in, and those countries controlled the companies inside of their countries and had all sorts of restrictions on them. Over time, they realized that controlling everything just wasn't competing with the rest of the world. So first China in the 1980s decided to have this, and then because it was such a success, more places in China had them, and then also Vietnam copied this idea too. So the idea is a special economic zone wherein coastal cities, because that's good for exports, where you have a port. Okay, so the deal with the special economic zones is that you allow, inside the coastal cities, you allow foreign companies to build their factories or facilities in those cities, and what's in it for the company is that you give them special tax privileges, right? So the company wants to locate in your city because they are given like a reduction on those export taxes, and then it also helps your country because now you have competition inside of your country and you're letting those transnational corporations build their factories. So overall, this was a really popular idea, and so a lot of places in China and in Vietnam along the coast have enacted this, so that in these special economic zones, there isn't a complete command economy, but rather capitalism is happening, and it's been good for the economies of those two countries. Okay, so that's it for lesson 7.8. So we looked at agglomeration, and then the opposite, deglomeration, and then what the special economic zones are. Okay, so we'll be back next time for the last lesson in this unit. Okay, see ya.